Hi everyone, this is YM. If you notice, I'm wearing I'm recording on my laptop, so I'm wearing a headset with a microphone so that I can kind of clean up the sound. Because if I just use the laptop's mic, the sound won't be that good. So just this, I'm just giving you a heads up about why I'm wearing the headset right here. I wanted to talk to y'all tonight about the importance of black spaces. And I kind of came this thought kind of came to me because earlier today I attended the second annual Black August in the Park event. It was held in Durham's Central Park, which is kind of like the downtown, like kind of west downtown, um, where the farmers market is. And I went to that event today, and it was the second annual event. I didn't go last year. I didn't know about it last year, but I did go. Someone told me about it. One of the volunteers for the event told me about it. Told me about it like a month and a half ago. So that's why I decided to go, and I was looking forward to it like this whole time, like basically on pins and needles. And when I was there, I saw black people of all ages, all genders, every background, not just African Americans, but black people who were, from the continent, Nigerian, Senegalese, Kenyan black folks. Well, they had food trucks out there, and there was a food truck that was owned by Afro Puerto Rican um, entrepreneurs, and they had DJs there, so it was mostly just like they were playing hip hop music and everything. But just seeing like just the diversity of people, the diversity of, like, as I said, age and gender, and I mean the whole range of skin colors from, like, really white passing to, like, obsidian, bone black. So because black people are every color of the rainbow. And so it just got me thinking, and just all these people having fun together and out with their kids and grandchildren and everything, and college students, and just across the board, black people from every background. And it just got me thinking about just the importance of black people, whatever walk of life you come from, black people having space. Because when you live in a society like the United States, or Canada or Britain, what have you, any society like that where white people are or non-black people are the majority, but specifically in my case, Anglo-white people, English-speaking white people, are the majority. It really, you don't see a lot of, images, of yourself. You don't see a lot of reflection of yourself, particularly as a kid growing up. Now, I think these days it's different for today's babies and school children and young people because I was born in the 70s. So you other than like the 70s sitcoms that revolved around African American families, like Good Times and What's Happening and the Jeffersons. Other than those sitcoms, you really didn't see black people on TV. Particularly as because I was born in the 70s, but I really was a kid in the 80s, and so by the time I hit childhood in the 80s, like there was hardly any representations of black people in media or on television. Of course, you had you had superstars like Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. That's my whole childhood. Michael Jackson, Prince, Whitney Houston, Luther Vandross, and as you know, they're all gone now. All of them have passed on. But those were the representations of blackness when I was a kid, and again, all these people are African American. Now, also, as we know today, Whitney Houston and Luther Vandross were LGBTQ people, but Whitney being bisexual and Luther being gay. But when I was a kid, I didn't know that. I had no idea that they were LGBTQ people, and so I just grew up with very limited representations of blackness. I've never been a big sports fan, but like, of course, Michael Jordan, when by the time I hit late elementary school, he was huge, right? And so, those were kind of the role models that kids of my generation had. But again, whether it's popular music or whether it's sports or whether it's, rarely, you know, Hollywood. Now, the exception to that was Eddie Murphy, who was a huge star when I was a kid. He's not, he's kind of just like a elder statesman now. But when I was a kid, he was a superstar. I mean, he was as famous. um, in terms of movie making as I mean, I don't even know who the hot black movie stars these days are now. But he was as famous. I'll just tell you, Eddie Murphy was as famous as Beyonce when I was a kid, right? So that was his level of just superstardom. But those are the only images I had of black folk. And I didn't know any black people like me. Again, I didn't really understand that I was queer. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't have any language around it. I just knew I was different from other black girls. And also, I was one of those kids that listened to so-called like white music. Like, I mean, what does that mean though? What is white music, right? Really, in my case, it was black music as performed by white people. Really, Led Zeppelin and Metallica and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. I was a huge fan of like white male rock music growing up, and still am. But now, of course, as an adult who's an activist, I'm way more critical of it now. But those were that was just like I just had such limited representation of blackness as a kid, and just growing up as a kid that when I was born in the early parts of my childhood, I lived in suburbia, but then after my parents split up, I grew up in the hood. So just having this weird background class wise where I'm socialized initially as a suburban kid and then I become a hood kid, right? And so it just kind of messed me up in a lot of ways, and just dealing with other kids who were doing, in the hood, who were dealing with the same struggles I had in terms of not knowing who we were, not having any good role models. One of the things I noticed earlier today at Black August in the park was seeing so many parents and children that were modeling a vision of blackness that I could have only dreamed of as a kid. Like, I grew up with two parents, African American, raised in the Jim Crow South, Boomer generation, post World War II generation, both my parents, right? And their representations of blackness were limited as hell. Like, and they dealt with all the self hatred and self loathing that black people dealt with, and making jokes about people being dark skinned and not wanting to get in the sun because you don't want to get too darker. So just like the kind of the misogynoir, the kind of messed up attitudes, the terrible cis sexist gender politics, the ignorance about Africa. Oh my God. Like, my parents' generation knew as kids in school, my mother and father knew very little about Africa. I don't think my dad knows much about Africa. I mean, he could probably tell me wrong, but I don't think my dad knows much about Africa now. And everything I've learned about the continent and our ancestors in our history, I had to learn in college. I didn't learn until I was in my late teens when I started, community college, right? And started taking Black history and African history classes. So I just grew up with very little self-knowledge about what it meant to be a black person, and particularly a black person in a Anglo Protestant colonial society like the United States. I just didn't know what anything meant. And so I feel like today's kids are getting like so much. Not only do they have better role models and a wider diversity of role models, right? They got Rihanna, who's Afro-Caribbean. They got Beyonce, who's not only African-American, but Louisiana Creole. So they had, they got queer, they got this Big Frida. There's Angel Hayes. There's Frank Ocean, who finally came out with his album, right? So they got famous black queer role models now, which again, as a kid, all my, not, unwittingly, the queer role models I had were all closeted. So I didn't even know they were queer. So today's kids they have greater access to, as Laverne Cox would say, possibility models for blackness than kids of the Gen X generation did, and even the older millennial generation of black folks in this country did. And so, and not saying that it's anywhere where it needs to be. There's still a lot of anti-black attitudes, a lot of like misogynist attitudes, our attitudes about black women and femmes, our transphobia, our transmisogyny, our colorism that we've internalized, which is still like terrible. Our attitude, particularly our attitudes toward dark-skinned, feminine of center people, are just horrible. Because I mean, all those things we're dealing with from the media, and just like even our our parents they still have that detritus, that debris of really white supremacist thinking that they grew up with, in the for a lot of you out there, like the boomer generation is your grandparents' generation. That would be my parents' generation. So we're still growing up with a lot of the messed up ideas about Africa and African people and black people, the diaspora, that they internalized as children. So we're still living with that stuff, and also today's younger children and younger adults have, they've grown up with 8 years of President Barack Obama in the White House. So for black kids not just in the United States, but all around the world, they've had this black man and this black family in the most powerful residence on earth. United States is the leader of the free world, right? So, there's a lot, even as there is a lot more access to black possibility models, there's still structural anti-blackness in society. And so, we need opportunities as black people to come together. Traditionally, as a black Southerner, somebody from my background, the black church was always like kind of the black institution. For some of you out there, you may be members, those of you who are college graduates, that is, or college students right now, you may be members of fraternities or sororities. I've never been a Greek letter person ever, so I don't really know what that world is. But you may be members of black fraternities or sororities. You may be, if you're a black business person, you may be members of like black business or entrepreneurial organizations. But still, all those things, those institutions still have varying levels of how they engage with anti-blackness and how they engage with the isolation that black people, and erasure, really, the erasure that black people experience in society. So that's why events like Black August, if you have similar events in your area, or Juneteenth, in June, the Juneteenth celebrations around this country, that's why they're so important. But also, every constituency of black people needs its own groups and its own organizations. If you're a black LGBTQ person, you need your own black spaces, that focus on the needs of black LGBTQ people. Black women need their own spaces. Black parents need their own spaces. It's just like you need to be in community with people who understand what the burden of blackness is, because blackness is a burden. Let's just be honest. It's a huge burden in a world where still African people are striving for autonomy and liberation. That's just how it is. So I'm just rambling at this point, but those are the thoughts that just come to my head about the importance of an event like Black August, anywhere in the world, anywhere in the United States. And so yeah. Let me know what you think about this video. And yeah, subscribe to this channel below. And I'll see y'all next time. Take care. Bye.